Well, joining me now in the studio is Kimberly Brown, Head of Humanitarian Policy at the British Red Cross. Kimberly, thank you for coming in.
Yeah.
Just how significant is this development, this withdrawal?
Well, we're always encouraged to see anything that will help humanitarian aid get into the country, but Yemen is absolutely at a breaking point. It's the worst humanitarian crisis in the world. Over 80% of the population are in need of assistance, and nearly 14 million people are at risk of starvation. And we're extremely concerned, and the reports I have from the colleagues there are very distressing.
So by withdrawing from Hodeida, you're essentially opening up this lifeline. How easy or difficult is it then to start deploying that aid? What needs to be done?
Well, Hodeida is able to give about 70% of access to humanitarian aid, but throughout the country, people are deeply in need. We've seen damage to vital infrastructure, schools, hospitals. Only 50% of health facilities are functioning. And in Sana'a, where I visited, my colleagues from the Yemen Red Crescent Society are delivering water, and that's the only way the population are able to get clean drinking water is from our sister national society on the ground there.
So speaking to your colleagues, what sort of update have they provided you with?
Well, one of the main concerns now is cholera. So that's a disease that's mostly been eradicated. So that's new cases are being reported every single day. So health is a big issue. Like I mentioned, famine, nearly half the country at risk of famine. But also we're concerned that civilians really have to be the priority and have to be protected in this conflict. And that's why we want all sides to respect international humanitarian law and let aid workers do their job. We've lost 11 staff and volunteers from the Red Cross and Red Crescent. So aid workers also are not safe in this conflict.
Yeah, I was going to say, how easy is it for you, for aid groups to move around the country? Are you encouraged by this withdrawal? Will the conditions improve to try and get the aid to those who need it?
We are encouraged by this development, and we have been. Every time when we think there's good news, such as a ceasefire or opening of aid routes, we're always very encouraged. But humanitarian aid is not going to save Yemen alone. We need lasting political solutions. People have experienced unimaginable suffering for the past 4 years, and they need a long-term solution so they can rebuild their lives, get back to safety, and get the things that they need for their families. And that's why we call it the British Red Cross for support for our appeal, so that we can work with the Red Cross and Red Crescent movement to continue to deliver the essential humanitarian aid that's needed.
We were hearing from Lise Grande earlier of the UN, and she was talking about funds and pledged funds and received funds. What are your priorities in terms of resources? What do you need to then pass on to the people?
Well, yeah, we have an appeal, like I mentioned, at the British Red Cross, and we work with all parts of the Red Cross and Red Crescent movement, including those local actors on the ground, the Yemen Red Crescent Society. So we're able to deliver food, health care, water, some medicines, working with different partners. And so our challenge is access. And so when we have these encouraging developments, potentially like more access being able to get through that port in Hodeida, that may help us to operate further. But it's a very difficult operating environment. But we are still able to reach people, but there are so many more people that we are able to reach if we receive more funds, more humanitarian access.
How long are you planning, or do you foresee, before people start receiving that aid? The Houthi rebels are withdrawing from the key ports, particularly at Hodeida. You have mentioned damaged infrastructure. How long will it take for people to start receiving the aid?
Well, people are receiving aid already, but they will receive more and more the more that these aid corridors or access opens up. Like I mentioned, Hodeida is responsible for the lifeline. 70% of aid can go through there, but it's only been functioning at about half so far. So the more that opens up, the better it will be. We have been operating for a long time in Yemen through the Yemen Red Crescent Society, other partners in the Red Cross and Red Crescent movement. But we foresee our work there to be still long-term as well. It takes a long time to recover, even if the fighting were to cease.
Yeah, just obviously looking at the agreement itself, I'm sure partners like yourself and the UN and other aid groups will be watching things very closely. So the rebels withdraw, you start to get that aid in. What do you see in terms of planning as the next step in terms of ensuring security for Yemenis?
Well, like I said, a long-term political solution is needed, but our priority is saving lives as much as we can, as fast as we can. With 14 million people at the brink of starvation, it's the immediate life-saving assistance that we need to focus on. And so that's food, that's water, that's medicines, people who are pregnant, giving birth. There's so much need across the country. As I mentioned, it's the worst humanitarian crisis in the world, and we have so much work to do there, and we value any support that we're given.
Okay, Kimberly Brown, thank you very much for coming in. Thank you.